Right on. Well, really excited to be here and really excited about my amazing design skills in this slide that you're looking at right now. That took me a long time, so I hope you appreciate it. Yeah, so here I'm wanting to take you app to the future. Things are going to get a little weird for the first part of this talk, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm going to attempt to tell the past, present, and future of Selenium and Appium in no particular order, and using only mostly bad puns on characters and scenes from 80s sci-fi movies. So if that doesn't make sense to you, well, it's about to make even less sense. But first, I'm this person. I have a much larger beard, though, than when that picture was taken. As Marcus mentioned, I work at Sauce Labs, been there for a long time, and I have recently started a new role as the director of open source. And I'm not entirely sure what that means yet, trying to figure that out, but certainly, at the very least, means staying really engaged with Selenium and Appium, which we obviously care a great deal about. I'm also the Appium project lead, and I've been writing code for Appium and doing project management for Appium and all that for about 4 years, almost 4 years now. As Marcus mentioned, and as Dan pointed out in his talk yesterday, I also do write and record music, and so my band is called Splendor Hyolyn. It's spelled kind of funny. This was before I learned about SEO and people finding things online. So if you type that into Spotify or iTunes or Amazon, you should come up with some of my music if you want to give it a listen, and follow us on Twitter and all of that. Right, so time to take our journey into the future. By the way, just so you know, I will give you a large high five after the talk today if you can count how many 80s movie references, how many movies I've referenced in this talk. So start counting now. Okay, here's our time machine, right? We have to be careful in going to the future, and given that we're on a schedule, we need to be back in 2016 by, let's say, 1:05 or so. So if we're not back by then, we're going to be stuck in the future forever, and that would be maybe not so bad, but we want to come back for lunch. So here we are, far in the future, right? This is the StarDriver Enterprise, and the StarDriver Enterprise has a very important mission, which is to automate strange new devices, to support new user experiences, and to boldly assure quality, which no one has assured before. So in this radical future, various civilizations live together in harmony, understanding each other using one language, the StarDriver protocol. And when new devices and user experiences are designed, testing is at the front of people's minds, and automation is really easy. And so the mission of the StarDriver Enterprise is to kind of bring this vision to new worlds, right? This is the crew of the StarDriver Enterprise. They're awesome group of people led by some guy with the surname of Stewart, but that's neither here nor there. The existence of StarDriver was prophesied long ago in 2015 by this guy, the Kwisatz Haderach. But it took a long time and a lot of effort for that prophecy to come true, of course. So to see more of how that happened, we have to go back in time to a long time ago, little planet called Tatooine, where we have a young dev named Cuke Codewalker, and he's getting really tired of testing the software on his moisture evaporators manually, and that's just he's just kind of frustrated about this. Then one day, he gets a distress call from some person in outer space. It turns out that the evil Galactic Empire is threatening to overrun the universe with their clone army of manual testers. So Cuke's mentor, Ruby-Wan Kenobi, begins to tell Cuke about the source, which is the code that binds everything together. So Cuke begins to try and learn the ways of the source, but soon discovers that it's a little harder than you might have expected. Meanwhile, we've got Emperor Aplatine and his protege Darth Vandroid, and they're continuing their inexorable march towards total galactic domination. So how can people's apps be tested in such an environment of total control? This is a real big problem. But there are other kinds of problems, of course, that have come up in the history of StarDriver. And so we have to go to another time and place to see other ways that things have gotten bad. So this town is called Kingston Fails. It looks nice. Lots of developers there trying to ship features to users. Here's a nice little feature that someone's trying to ship. It's really cute, but Kingston Fails' developers are a pretty lazy bunch, and several of them forgot to test their software in cases where it received data after midnight or was exposed to water. And so what happened? Of course, their apps became full of regremlins. And all of these regremlins were, really, really messing up the town of Kingston Falls. In fact, killed many people. It was bad news. So this is the kind of thing that can happen if you're not careful about testing your software. Another example, another time and place here. This is beta build LV426, which was sent to a group of very brave users who were going to beta test the software. But we haven't heard from these users in a long time. We don't know what's happened to them. All communication was cut off, right? So a crack team of product managers decided to go and find out what happened to them. And so here they are getting ready to go figure that out. What they discovered was a species of bug that was so virulently deadly that it killed all the beta testers and eventually killed all the product managers too. So yeah. But one woman, Selenium Ripley, discovered discovered the key to squashing these super bugs, right? Using robots. With the power of a robot, she was able to blast the queen bug out of an airlock and ensure that the next group of users would never encounter it again. So Selenium Ripley, showed the power of robotic automation when dealing with bugs. And there have been many other robots through the ages and through different galaxies and universes, speaking different languages and solving different problems, all in the name of making our apps better. But nothing quite like the StarDriver Enterprise yet. So let's take a break and go back to see how our friend Cuke is doing. And it's not very well. The rebel Appliance is on the retreat from the Galactic Empire, and Cuke is needing help. So he seeks out a true master of the source, known only as Noda. And Noda opens Cuke up to the true power of the source, which is automation. Flushed with confidence, Cuke rushes to face his nemesis, Darth Vandroid, where he learns some very unsettling facts about their relationship. It was a disaster. And on top of that, all Cuke's friends and allies were captured. But he didn't give up, and he was resourceful. So he rescued his friends from that vile gangster Jabba the Hutt, and together they were able to defragment mobile app testing using the power of the source. So the rebel Appliance soon became the rebel Appium Alliance, and they took the fight back to the Galactic Empire's secret weapon, destroying it once and for all. Oh no, look at the time. We have to get back to 2016 before it's too late, right? So here we go on our way back to Selenium Conference 2016. And that's the end. Well, not quite, because as you might have expected, there's a sequel. Won't be as fun. This is where I start hopefully making more sense to you all and tell you what I'm really trying to say in this talk. So get ready to be a little bit more bored. Okay, so let's slow down a little bit, talk about the vision of Selenium, the vision of Appium, and what we mean when we're talking about StarDriver, which was kind of introduced as a concept last year. Right, Selenium's vision was to, basically give people a way to automate browsers. That's what the, Huggins and others were trying to do when they originally made Selenium. That was the goal of the WebDriver project as well. Eventually, it seemed like a really good idea to make this a standardized way of doing things, right? Why have all these different ways of trying to solve the same problem? We hit upon a good model, a good architecture. The whole server-client thing was great. Writing testing language is great. Let's try and standardize this and actually then convince the browser vendors to maintain the actual automation technology rather than having some independent open source project doing that, because it's an awful lot of work. And then, so, eventually the end of the road for that particular vision is there is no more automation code in Selenium itself. It's just, clients, the spec, maybe some things that are built around that in the ecosystem that vendors wouldn't care about, like a Selenium grid, that kind of thing. So, how was Selenium done? Well, kind of from my outside perspective, they've certainly delivered on, most of these things and are well on their way to not ever using PowerPoint instead of Keynote again. Yeah, so this is supposed to be kind of an in-progress little emoji there. But yeah, so not all the code is gone, but it's most of the actual work is now being done by Chrome driver and Edge driver and Safari driver and Gecko driver and all these things, right? So then let's think about Appium. In many ways, Appium came on the scene, a long time after Selenium. We had the benefit of being able to look at what Selenium was doing well and say, oh, just do that, right? Why not just repeat kind of their recipe for success? And that's mostly what we've tried to do. And up until recently, this has kind of been Appium's vision. It's more or less exactly the same as Selenium's vision. Problem of lack of mobile automation. Let's give people the ability to automate things. Let's do it using this WebDriver spec with some extensions. Let's make those extensions official. And then eventually, maybe we can even convince mobile vendors like Apple and Google to create the automation technology in a way where we don't have to actually maintain the implementations ourselves. And we can delete that code, put all the Appium specific extensions in the Selenium clients, and boom, no more Appium code anywhere. And that would be great. And how have we been doing on this? We've done a couple of these things over the years. But we, certainly are getting nowhere in terms of convincing people like Apple to, write a WebDriver-based automation technology. They had UI automation, now they have XUI tests. They'll probably do something else later that shows no indication of having listened to what testers actually want, and so on. So this is a problematic thing, right? And because that's problematic, we certainly can't get to the point of deleting all the code that we might want to delete. So anyway, here we are working on our similar to Selenium vision for mobile automation. But then things start to happen to the project that weren't really part of the initial plan. We have these crazy people coming to us saying, hey, I figured out how to automate this thing. You want to put that into Appium? And hey, I figured out how to automate this other thing. Can I put that into Appium? And I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? That sounds great. Why not automate more things, right? So, up until very recently, this is kind of what Appium looked like in a very simple form. We had our kind of JSON wire protocol-based server that lets you target a couple different automation backends or drivers or whatever you want to call them. We had our iOS support through instruments in UI automation. We had our Android support through UI Automator, and then we also targeted Selendroid, which you're probably familiar with too. So this is a simple view. You can see the little cloud thing is designed to signify that this is all part of one software package. So when you installed Appium, this was all bundled in there. So this schematic is just kind of showing you some of the internals, how things are organized. And here's what Appium kind of looks like today. In the past year, we've more than doubled, pretty much more than doubled the number of drivers that we have. We've added UI Automator 2 support, XUI test support, thanks to the work that Lawrence and Merrick and the folks at Facebook have been doing on WebDriver Agent. There's an app development framework for TV apps called UI TV, and they made a driver for Appium. And then Microsoft came to us and said, hey, we want to give our Microsoft Windows desktop app developers the ability to automate their apps, and we want it to be an Appium. And I said, that is awesome, absolutely. So this is a kind of explosion of drivers, and the theme is kind of broadening too, right? We have TV apps, which are kind of like mobile apps. They can run on iOS and Android, but as you're getting a little broader here. And we also have now Windows desktop apps. So the umbrella is getting bigger. And the software package is getting bigger too, because these things are all still bundled in Appium. And it's starting to feel a little like, do these things really all go together? They're all great, but it's nice that you can do all these things, but you probably don't care about all of them at the same time. So I'm going to talk about that, but just wanted to give you a little bit of a demo of what what some of the new drivers look like. Dan showed yesterday the new Mac driver, which I didn't even have time to put on this slide. I won't show anything about XUI Test or UI Automator 2 because they look essentially the same as the old iOS and Android things from the outside. But here is a video, hopefully it's playing, yes, of the Windows support that's now built into Appium. Maybe it's not playing. Maybe I have to click something. No. What's the next video? Let me try that again. I'm not actually controlling this with my computer. Does the person backstage, does it work if you click on it? Okay, well, video fail. Even when you do a video demo, it fails. Okay, so this is the UI TV driver. So these are all TV apps that are built to run on different platforms. And this is all being automated using their driver. So it's just one test, same code, and it kind of runs on all those different platforms. So that's pretty cool. I'll make the Windows video available for you guys to see later. It's just the same old automate the calculator app that tests that you've seen before. The cool thing about it is it's really, really fast. So if you do have a Windows desktop app and you want to automate it with Appium, it seems like it's a really great experience. I don't build Windows desktop apps, so I don't know from that perspective, but it looks great. Okay, so we currently have drivers for browsers via Selenium, mobile apps via Appium, desktop apps now via Appium, and even TV apps. There's another guy, Christian Broman, who's the maintainer of WebDriver.io, who is working on a HBB TV driver for Appium now as well, so we're definitely getting into that kind of TV space. But soon there's things like car apps, right? All the cars will have all these smart apps that will probably not be that smart and probably have bugs and probably kill people. So we need to find a way to add some serious quality into that whole situation. IoT devices, right? Probably Nests have figured out a way to kill people. Probably refrigerators will soon figure out a way to kill people, right? So the stakes are getting a lot higher in terms of automation and the responsibility of people to test the hardware-software integrations and everything, because these devices, for better or worse, are becoming much more integrated into the way that we live our daily lives. I should say for better and worse, probably. So yeah, imagine going back to our kind of futuristic example, how you would go about automating the cockpit of an X-Wing using the WebDriver protocol. Well, you could certainly think of switches and buttons and things like that, like buttons in a graphical UI. You tap a button on a iPad or whatever. It's more or less the same as hitting an actual button. In fact, actual buttons came first, believe it or not. And you could simulate the resulting behavior. You could have an X-Wing simulator the same way you have an iOS simulator. I used to play a lot of X-Wing simulators when I was younger, actually. And you could also have, if you had the right sort of environment to actually fire proton torpedoes and measure blast and damage results and things like that, you could have a full real device X-Wing test with your weapon systems. But mapping that to the WebDriver protocol is actually not very hard, I don't think. You can do something like assert that you have a certain number of torpedoes, and then find your trigger button using the driver, and then clicking it. We probably still use driver.click way in the future because we'll never update it. It'll just always be click, even though it'll mean different things, but it'll always be .click. It'll be one of those weird things that kids don't understand. And then we want to assert that the 2 proton torpedoes have fired, and so now we have fewer proton torpedoes, right? The structure, the way you think about testing is not going to change whether you're testing an X-Wing or whether you're testing a web browser. The challenging part, of course, is going to be creating that simulator in a way that will provide a useful validation, or getting an X-Wing and putting it in a weapons test scenario and things like that. That'll be difficult. Having an X-Wing would be cool in the first place, but anyway, the WebDriver part isn't the hard part. So this gets us thinking about the StarDriver vision, which Hugs basically or briefly talked about last year. It's a simple idea. It's basically taking, Selenium vision and Appium vision and saying, I see a pattern here, right? We want to automate web browsers. Now we want to automate this. Why wouldn't that desire to automate things continue to grow as the things we have to automate continue to grow, right? And that is happening. We have so many kinds of devices, as I showed on a previous slide, right? And why not continue to generalize the WebDriver spec in all of those different automation scenarios? If we followed the same pattern as the previous visions, we would say, at some point, all of the vendors of all of the things and all of the galaxies and all of the universes would support the WebDriver spec natively. But that's probably not going to happen. As new devices come out, as new companies come out, the chances that they're going to be enlightened from the outset and say, we're going to build in automation using the WebDriver protocol from the very beginning are low, maybe increasing over time, but there will probably always be this sort of, offset pattern where we have to do a little bit of work to automate something and make it conform to the WebDriver protocol initially, and then once that thing gets popular enough and there's enough motivation behind standardizing it, maybe then a vendor would step in and say, okay, we'll maintain this automation technology ourselves. And that's how you get StarDriver. It's not that complicated. So going back to Appium, this is the same slide as before. This is what Appium currently looks like. Imagine adding more and more drivers, right? Kind of implementing this StarDriver vision, and new things come up, and next year is like this year, and then we have 10 drivers instead of 7 or whatever we have now. Feels like it will start to get pretty unwieldy. 2 reasons I think it'll get unwieldy. I think there's more, but just 2 for example. Appium's download size and dependency tree would just be out of control. You'd be downloading megabytes of binaries for drivers that you don't even care about, and that's no fun. Also think about semantic versioning for something like this, where you have many what are really independent pieces of technology being developed at their own rates, but we have to somehow combine that all into one version of Appium. It just doesn't really make sense anymore. So what would make sense? Something that looks more like this, I think, where each of the drivers are treated more as kind of plugins that can have their own independent existence, sort of the same way that Chrome driver and Safari driver and Edge driver have their own independent existence, even though they're doing similar things. And they have their own development path and their own release cycles. And then Appium can become simply a sort of management interface for getting these drivers and setting them up, and also a code interface that directs drivers how to be constructed on a code level. So that's what I think Appium 2.0 is going to be whenever we get around to implementing it. More of an umbrella interface for drivers in a way similar to how Selenium itself now works. But kind of differently to Selenium, we want it to be a driver manager as well, to take the pain out of kind of installing and choosing and managing drivers and keeping them updated. So just for example, this obviously is not built yet, but this is kind of imagining what it could look like. We add some options to the Appium command line interface where you could say, hey, install a couple drivers for me. I want XCUI test at its latest version and the UI Automator 2 driver at some specific version I care about. And it goes and does that for you and tells you, okay, this is the capability that you'll need to use in order to access this driver. And when you start up Appium, it says, okay, these are the drivers that I know about now that you've kind of installed. And here's what you can automate. Give you a list of drivers. What's out there? What can I automate using Appium, and what are their versions? Maybe building a custom driver that only my company cares about, but I just want to take part in this ecosystem because all the tools are there, and I never want to open source this or make it available to other people. It's just on our private GitHub repo. If it follows the same interface, why not allow that to be installed and configured in your Appium server as well? Or updating, right? Why not just run one command and have all the drivers updated to their latest versions unless there's been some kind of breaking change, which then we can warn you about. So that's a kind of fun idea, and I think that's kind of getting towards Appium as this hub for all the different kinds of drivers and not sort of maintaining the particular technologies itself. So how do we get to StarDriver? More concretely, what's kind of a midterm vision or intermediate steps along the way? Well, just kind of looking at what the best automation technologies are for all of the things that are out there and writing some kind of translation layer, some kind of WebDriver protocol shim for all of them, so that we can bring them into Appium and give you access to them. This is also beneficial, as we talked about yesterday, because if you're automating a particular platform and the automation technologies change, we can just make that change under the hood and not force you to have to, follow the vendor's whims in using all of their tools and whatnot. Maybe you want to do that, that's great, but maybe you don't. So just kind of maintaining that stable JSON wire protocol interface is something that's very useful in and of itself, even if it doesn't, at the end of the day, take a whole lot of code. And if we can do that successfully, we'll kind of prove out the benefits of this sort of standardization and encourage the vendors to eventually come in, like they have done with Selenium and the browsers, and take that on themselves, because they see the value of it and they see how it makes the apps that people are writing on their platforms or on their browsers so much better. So what is Appium then in that future? I mean, it might start to feel a little vague, more like an idea than an actual piece of software. And that's kind of true. It becomes more of a unifying idea or just an interface to an ever-widening array of drivers that we don't particularly participate in the building of, or some of us do and some of us don't, or whatever. You could also think of it as similar to Selenium, sort of just a repository of wisdom for how to do this automation thing. So much of what you learn in automating web applications is transferable to automating mobile applications, and that's probably going to be true for the other types of things we're going to be automating in the future. And I think Appium will always include a library of code that enables you to quickly write this sort of driver plugin, WebDriver shim interface kind of thing on top of whatever the underlying automation technology ends up being. And then more of our kind of short-term roadmap, just for those of you who are interested in Appium and want to follow along with what we're doing. We are dedicated to continuing to provide support for iOS and Android. That's what people are using us for right now. And so we want to make sure that when iOS 10.2 and 10.3 and 11 come out, that those things are there, and ideally even before the official release of those platforms. We know that people really depend on the graphical interface for Appium, and particularly the inspector, which helps you write your tests. And so we want to build new ones of those and maintain them in a way that the old ones are not really possible to maintain. Onboarding improvements, performance improvements. I mean, the things that Lawrence was talking about today are certainly in terms of kind of speeding up simulator boot and kind of having this stage where you boot the simulator and then leave them hot, running, ready for tests to start on them. Really cool stuff, and we'll be able to incorporate some of that into Appium itself so that you get those benefits for free if you're using Appium. And then crazy new drivers, like who's going to come to us this year and say, we want to build a driver for HoloLens or whatever crazy VR thing is coming out. And we try and keep our roadmap up to date on GitHub, so you can always check it out there. Just a little sneak peek of what the new GUIs will look like. This is working. It doesn't have the inspector yet, but it's a working server. So this is just, basically you set your address and port, and then there's other tabs where you can set all the various server flags and options and things like that. What's kind of cool about this is written in Electron, so it's an Electron app, and because Electron is based on Node and Appium is based on Node, Appium is actually imported as an in-memory library to this, and so it's not running as a sub-process or anything like that. So there can be a very nice integration between Appium and this graphical interface. And then, of course, it's basically, at this point, just sort of a viewer for the logs. But it works. You can go and build it yourself if you want. The obviously important part is building the inspector, which we're going to start working on very soon. In other news, you may have heard, you may not have heard, but Sauce Labs, who has been really driving the development of Appium since the beginning, has really wanted to help Appium grow up as an open source project. And we've always run Appium as an open source project. We've never sort of taken advantage of our privileged position as being the people that had most of the Appium developers or held the copyright or things like that. And we wanted to really show the community that that was true in word and deed as well as in spirit and how we've been running it. So we donated Appium to the JavaScript Foundation about a month ago now. Yeah, thanks. It really felt like the right time for Appium and the right thing to do, and we wanted to show our commitment to open source in that way. I think that what that means for you is that particularly if you work for a company that might have had restrictions around contributing to open source projects held by private companies or things like that, now is a great time to get involved with the development of Appium and help us work on this kind of StarDriver vision that's emerging. So, is Appium StarDriver? I mean, you might think I've sort of been implying that throughout this talk. Really, it kind of doesn't matter. It's up to you to decide. At the end of the day, Selenium is part of StarDriver's future history. Appium is part of StarDriver's future history. And whatever name it eventually goes by, whether that's Selenium or Appium or StarDriver or something else, doesn't really matter. And the people that are building StarDriver or Selenium or Appium matter very little. I mean, we do some cool things, but at the end of the day, we matter a lot less than individual developers like all of you choosing to stick with the WebDriver protocol and make that the standard, make that the idea that all of this kind of hangs on. And so at the end of the day, it's really up to all of you to just keep pushing that forward by using Selenium, using Appium, using all the tools that come out and kind of adhere to this protocol. So that's what it's all about. Yeah, as you need to automate more and more platforms and devices, choose tools that use this protocol or extend this protocol or are really working with pushing this forward. And we'll see how far we can push it and how successful we can make it become, whether one day we can actually automate some kind of spaceship with the WebDriver protocol. And keep the world safe from bugs, of course. Maybe not bugs that gestate inside you and eat your face, but we don't have those kind of bugs yet, thankfully. And with that, it is actually the real end now.
We have time for maybe one question. One question, anyone?
The question was, does Appium support Apple Watch? It may. It very well may. Put it that way. Actually, very few people care, apparently, about this. I've had it on the roadmap for a long time, and I've just been waiting for someone to ask for it, and no one's ever really asked for it, so we haven't put any effort into it. There is a watch simulator. It probably responds in some way. I don't know, maybe the Facebook guys are more up to date on what you can do with actually testing watch apps, but very few people have actually asked for that. So if you care about it, come and let me know.
TapsterBot could do some Apple Watch testing.
Indeed.
All right, I think we're good. So.